So we're about halfway through our 125cc go-kart build. And to say we've gone overboard on this thing would be an absolute understatement. First, we added this turbo with a custom turbo manifold. Then we fabricated this crazy 2-inch exhaust. But perhaps my favorite part of the whole build is this front-mounted intercooler. But although the build is looking absolutely awesome, we still have quite a lot of work to do to get this thing running and driving, and hopefully dosing. And I figured since we've already got carried away with this thing, we may as well take it one step further. So while I'm really happy with how everything is looking up front on the kart, it's time to focus our energy on the rear of the kart. So the seating position on the kart has always been a problem. Even when this 125cc motor was naturally aspirated, this thing popped wheelies so freaking easily. Now part of that is obviously to do with the amount of power and torque that the 125cc motor puts out, but a lot of it is also to do with the seating position on the kart. So currently our bums are right over the rear axle. And whilst I really want to keep this kart as compact as possible, we're going to shift this rear axle backwards about 100 millimeters. That should hopefully help with our wheelie problem, especially since we're going to be doubling, maybe even tripling the power of this motor with the turbo setup. While we're at it, we're also going to widen the rear track of the kart. Currently, the front is wider than the rear, and I want to add a little more stability to the kart, especially since we're going to be going a whole lot faster. So first things first, we're going to get right to work and start unbolting the rear of the kart. Let's go. So here is our rear axle from our kart, and we're going to extend this. So we don't have a lathe or anything at the shop, which makes this job slightly more difficult. So we're going to use the bandsaw to chop everything to make sure it's nice and straight. Then I'll show you guys how we're going to weld it all together to make sure that the axle is perfectly straight, because we cannot have any wobble in this axle, especially when we're going hopefully very fast with our turbo setup. First up, we're cutting through our rear axle at the point where we want to extend it. Then we mark our 19mm steel rod, give it a chop, and grind in a nice V so the welds can penetrate nice and deep. So to make sure we get this dead straight on here, we have a really janky tool that we've made, which is this guy right here. So basically, this inner diameter is the same as this outer diameter, and it's got a slot cut in it. So when we put it over, we can slide this through into that. We have a wee window where we can do the tacks, and we pull that off, and then we weld all the way around. Time to test and see if it actually works. So the butt of our go-kart is officially wider. I think it looks freaking sweet, but we're not quite done yet. Now we have to make it go backwards. Now I'm gonna keep it really simple for this. So basically what we're gonna do, we're gonna chop this bad boy off and basically just extend it and weld this to the steel that welds to the chassis. It probably sounds confusing when I say it like that, but you're about to understand exactly what I mean. Let's go. We're jumping back on the grinder and cutting off our old rear axle mounts. Then it's back to the trusty cardboard to make a template for the new piece we're looking to add to the chassis. A quick test fit tells us we're good to go before tracing our template onto our 4mm thick steel. Actually, that kind of looks like a gun. Once we cut our piece of steel, it's time to get welding. So the rear axle is now back on, and it's definitely looking a lot wider, that's for sure. So one thing we are going to do before we drive this thing is we're actually going to sleeve both of the parts where we've welded in new material. So we'll slip over a length of pipe and we'll weld either side of that pipe to add extra strength to the axle, because the last thing we want to happen is this axle breaking while we're under full throttle and going really fast or something like that. I'm pretty happy with these new rear plates as well. Obviously I still need to weld on the inside here, which will happen when we do the final welding of the frame and painting it all up. So don't forget, we still have to strip this thing down, add some more reinforcements, paint it properly and have it looking absolutely beautiful. But now that the rear wheels are in place and where they're going to be forever basically, we can go ahead and start thinking about where the fuel tank is going to sit, where the battery is going to sit, and where our loom is all going to go. So the thought process I have behind this is that we're going to hide everything at the rear of the kart. So I was thinking we can build a fully custom fuel tank that can sit back here. We can hide the battery, we can hide the ECU, and then we'll have a number plate at the back here. Look at that. That will kind of sit over all of it and cover it and make it look hopefully kind of nice and tidy, because the hard thing about having a full full loom ECU and everything like that on a cart like this is there's really no place to put it, which is kind of a big issue. So for the fuel tank, we're gonna build a fully custom fuel tank. It really only makes sense to do that. We've done such cool fabrication on the front of the cart. I really wanna keep that energy going for the rest of the cart. So here we have 3-inch stainless steel, and this is what we're gonna be making our tank out of. I understand steel is heavier than alloy, and we're gonna have the steel fuel tank at the back, along with probably the battery at the back as well, and that kind of has some substantial weight to it as well. So I am wary of having the weight over the back wheels like that, but at this stage, that's the only place we can really put it. So we'll start there. Obviously in the future, if we find that it's a problem, we could always modify things and move it as we need. So for the size of the fuel tank, I have a 600 ml bottle of water right here. It's essentially maybe just slightly smaller than our 3-inch piping itself. So I'm just gonna cut the piping to the same length as this water bottle. That way I know I have a little over 600 mils, probably more like 800 mils of fuel in our tank. For this tiny motor, that's probably more than enough, given that we're not gonna be riding this thing for long periods of time as well. And it's so easy to throw fuel in this thing as well, like it's not an issue. We're not gonna be going long distances on this thing. So we're gonna cut a length of the stainless, we'll cap it off at both ends, and then we're gonna make a custom filler neck. Now I'm so lucky to have sponsors like Raceworks on board with this channel. And they've thrown us a bunch of stuff to fit onto the drift cart, which is absolutely crazy. This thing is getting all of the quality parts thrown at it. So we've got everything here we need to build our new fuel cell, including the weld-on filler neck, which is gonna look so freaking good. We've got some weld-on stainless fittings, we've got some AN fittings here. It's gonna be absolutely bonkers. They also threw us some silicone hoses for the intercooler piping, so we're definitely gonna throw those on as well. But right now we're gonna get to work and make a fully custom fuel tank. Fabrication mode, let's go. Using our trusty water bottle, we mark and cut our 3-inch pipe for what is soon to be our new fuel tank. Then we mark out our end caps, which definitely don't look like a set of boobs, before cutting them out and using a flapper disc to perfect the shape for a nice tight fit. Once they're good to go, it's time to get carried away on the TIG welder. And here is our completed fuel tank. Look at that. So I actually got a bit carried away. Usually I just tack it together and then I'd have Bailey finish weld it, but this one, like TIG welding is so addictive. So I actually gave it a crack and welded it all together myself. Other than this bit right here, I'm gonna get Bailey to finish weld that bit. The ends are all welded on and it's not terrible. Like, I'm not mad at that whatsoever. Obviously I'm still learning, so there are a couple of errors here and there, but hey, it looks like a fuel tank, so that's pretty cool. I also tried alloy tack welding our Raceworks filler cap onto the 90-degree bend on the alloy, and I definitely did not do as good a job with that. Alloy is so difficult. It's tacked on, but it looks terrible, so Woz is going to have to fix my errors with that one. But hey, there's nothing wrong with being crap at something. You gotta start somewhere, and it's tacked on, so that's all that matters. So I welded this plate onto the back here, and this is where our fuel tank is gonna mount. So I'm gonna go ahead, mount that up now, and see how it looks. Look at that. Hell yeah, that looks so freaking good. I am absolutely stoked with that. So I mounted it slightly off to the left so that we could potentially have the battery mounted back here as well. But like, that looks so freaking cool. I had to use obviously the silicone joiner because this is alloy, that's stainless. You can't weld alloy to stainless, so but the joiner will work absolutely perfectly. I actually reckon it looks pretty darn cool. But I even took the time to make sure that when I welded this weldable bung onto the filler neck, that the Raceworks logo is nice and straight as well. Just little attention to detail, things like that really completely change the look of the build. But man, like that looks so freaking sick. Even from the front, like I absolutely love that. So good. Being able to do fab work like this is so freaking handy. And I'm just so freaking stoked. We're actually getting to a level where it's like a high level fab work. It actually looks good. Obviously it's just loose on here at the moment, so when we tied it all up, it'll be nice, but man, that is so freaking cool. So now that we have our fuel tank mounted, it is time to figure out how we're gonna mount our electronic fuel pump. Electronic? Electric fuel pump. So this pump has the fuel in, the fuel return, and the fuel send to the injector all on the one pump, just like that. It also has the little fuel pressure regulator right here. So I'm thinking we're going to mount it right here on the tank. So basically what we're gonna do is weld 2 AN fittings onto the tank right at the bottom. So we'll drill 2 holes, and that is so the fuel is always going downwards to the fuel pump so that we don't get any fuel surge when this thing is kind of going around corners. I'm trying to forward think this so that we don't make any mistakes or run into any issues later when we're trying to fit all the lines and everything like that. As it sits, I'm still really unsure with where all the ECU and stuff is gonna go. It's quite difficult, like I said at the start of the video, to fit everything in the space. So we're definitely figuring it out as we go. But right now, let's whip the fuel tank off and weld on some Raceworks fittings. This is the end result that we have come up with. Look at this contraption. The fuel pump's almost the same size as the fuel tank. So I actually decided to weld on a bracket at the back so that the fuel pump could basically cable tie to that bracket, make sure it's all nice and solid. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw this onto the cart. Use a little bit of YouTube magic with this one. Boom, look at that. So here is the fuel setup, basically completed. A couple of things still need to be final welded, but this is essentially exactly how it's gonna look. So here is the clearance that we have off the ground to the fuel pump, because I know a couple of people will comment about that, but we have no suspension on this thing, so obviously this isn't gonna move from where it is now, other than a little bit of the tire squish obviously when you sit on it, but I think that's still plenty of clearance, which is nice. So I'm relatively happy with like how this whole setup is. Feel free to jump in the comments below and pick it apart as you wish, or give me advice on how we could do it better. But essentially, like, the battery will go like here, which is pretty sick. And then there's still space for the fuel line to come up the back here. Obviously it'll run like along the rail here and into our injector up the front. So we should be able to keep that nice and tidy. Just really happy overall with the look of this. I think it looks so freaking good. It looks really professional, which must be said is quite surprising for me. Although the work we've been doing these days seems to be getting a lot better. So I'm pretty stoked with that. But the last thing we have to do before we end this video is mount our freaking number plate. I mean, technically we're allowed to mount it now because this thing is boosted. Boost hasn't reached the motor yet, but I'm gonna say we've got a turbo on it, so this is allowed to be on the cart. So let's go ahead and mount this number plate. So freaking cool. As you can see by staring at my back here, I chose a really good camera angle for you guys, but I drilled a few holes and used a couple of riv nuts to mount our rad new number plate to the back of the cart. You could say this wasn't really a priority at this stage of the build, but you can blame my ADD for that one. Number plate is officially mounted. That is absolutely crack up, but I'm freaking so happy with the progress that we've made today. Everything looks so damn good. This covers up everything so nicely in there as well. So, I mean, what a transformation. The back end is really coming together. The cart just looks so wildly different than what it was from when we started. I mean, this 125cc motor looked huge in this thing when we first put it in, and now it looks like it's right at home with its extended chassis. It just looks freaking awesome. This has been such a wild journey so far with this build, and I'm so glad that you are here with me to do it. But that is a wrap on this video. I've got to get home and edit this so I can get this up for you guys tonight, and then tomorrow I'm off to New Zealand, which means this is getting put on hold for the next week or so. Thanks to my good friend Guy Maxwell. He has invited us over to New Zealand, and we're gonna be hanging with the Night Ride crew, which is gonna be insane. I look up to those guys so freaking much. So it's gonna be absolutely wild hanging out over there with them. We're competing in an R32 Skyline in Drift Wars, which is gonna be ridiculous, as well as a bunch of other stuff. There's a car show as well that we're going to. I'm absolutely gonna make sure that I film everything over there. So I'll be putting out vlogs as we go over there. Then we get back and then we head to South Australia to compete in the E36 at round 2 of the Drifting SA competition. Grant Anderson's coming over from America, so it's gonna be a wild next couple of weeks. That means progress will be slow on the drift kart for the next couple of weeks, but hit that subscribe button, follow along with our journey nonetheless. It's gonna be an awesome couple of weeks. Then we'll be back. Next episode, we'll be wiring everything up on this thing, the ECU. All the intercooler piping should be finished welded when we get back as well, which means we maybe we can start this thing for the first time properly with boost on its ECU and all that. But thank you guys so much for watching. All the love is always appreciated. I'll see you guys in the next video. Off to New Zealand tomorrow. Peace. Bye. Man, this thing is just coming leaps and bounds. It's just gonna be a work of art by the time it's done. Bye.